Hi, this is Russell Stunner from teachertrainingvideos.com. In many ways, this is going to be one of the most boring videos I've ever done, but I think one of the most useful. I'm going to go through all the settings that are important if you are teaching online using Zoom. And there are three levels. There are general settings that you can create that will apply to every single meeting you create. Secondly, you can override some of those settings when you actually create a new meeting. So at the time that you create a meeting, you can override some of your general settings. And then it is possible while you're doing the lesson to also change some of the settings. So there's kind of three ways: the general, when you create the room, and actually when you're teaching live. Now, what I'm trying to do here is to really deal with some of these questions. Russell, I keep losing my chat room. That's happened to me loads of times as well. Russell, my students seem to be able to record the session. Russell, I can't get my students to a note on the screen. That's another setting that you've got. Russell, they can all note at the same time and I want to control that. Russell, they all seem to be screen sharing. Can I control that? So I've literally gone through every single setting that I can and tried to explain them so that you can get some control. And also point out from the teachers that I've been working with this week who are actually doing lessons and reporting back to me some of the experiences that they've had, especially with young learners, that have been really interesting. And so I've tried to put those tips in. Now I'm going to just say one thing super important. If you are a teacher that is going to be scheduling one class after the other, so you've got a lesson from 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8, etc. Please remember, you can only have in your account at any one time one lesson live, one room live. So it's not possible if you've got, say, a lesson from 5 to 6 and from 6 to 7, and you're teaching your 5 to 6 class, your 6 to 7 class, the students cannot join that class until the first one finishes, because you can only have one live lesson. So always put the students in the waiting room. That only counts if you are scheduling one after the other. If you just got one meeting, no problem. Let the students in before you start, no problem. But you can't do that if you've got 3 or 4 lessons, because you cannot have 2 live lessons. So therefore your students can't come in. Hope that's clear, because loads of people have been asking me that question. Let's get on with the video. As always, if it's useful, please like it, please share, please, any questions, put them in the section below. I'll do my best to reply. And as always, please come over and join me on teachertrainingvideos.com. Loads of free videos. Sign up to the newsletter and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let's get going. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to start with general settings, and then I'm going to go to specific settings when you create a meeting, and then I'm going to show you some of the settings that you can change when you're actually in a meeting. But before I start, I want to really just make one thing very clear when you start a meeting, because I've had so many emails about this. If we click on meetings and we schedule a meeting, so we click here, it doesn't matter what date you put. So let's say, for example, I schedule this meeting for next week. Okay, so I'm going to schedule it for the 31st of March. If I schedule it for that time and that date, and I won't change anything here, we'll be coming back and looking at all of this, and I click on save, though that meeting is not scheduled to start for another week, I can start it at any time. It has nothing to do with actually opening the room. The reason that you schedule a meeting is A, because when you then click on this invitation to send to your students, the date is all correct and the time is all correct for the students. B, because if you want to therefore use either any of these tools to add to the Google Calendar or Outlook, and I haven't really done this myself, but this is obviously means that, again, the date will be the correct and the time will be correct. But also, if we come back to my meetings, all your meetings are always in a list, and as soon as a meeting time has passed, it disappears. So always helps this list to always be scheduled by time. But you can go into any meeting, even if you've created it for next year, you can go in and just click on start and start the meeting straight away. So that has no control over when the meeting can actually start. It's simply to do with the scheduling and simply to do with the way that the meetings are organized in your schedule. We'll always put the nearest meeting or the meeting that you've got next at the top. And as soon as the time and the date has passed, it will disappear. which is very useful if you're, say, scheduling 5 lessons in a day. You'll always know that your next lesson is at the top. Hope that's clear. Now let's start to go through this in kind of order. Now, if you come down over here on the right hand side and come down to settings, there are quite a lot of settings about your meeting, and there are also settings about your recording. And I'm just going to highlight some of the really important ones that people keep asking me about. First of all, and this is kind of surprised me, but obviously a lot of students are connecting to the Zoom lessons using their telephone. So it is a good idea to make sure that you always choose telephone and computer audio, because quite a lot of students are using their smartphones to connect to the Zoom lessons, and I hadn't really thought about that. Often, for example, if you've got 2 or 3 members of a family studying at a school, then they can't all be on their computer at the same time. So in that case, a lot of them will need to connect through their telephone. So it's a good idea to have that setting on. Now, actually, again, something I've learned this week is that join before the host is not necessarily a good idea, and let me explain why. Because if a teacher, let's say, has got a class from 5 o'clock till 6 and then another class from 6 till 7, then it's not possible for the students to go into the room before the previous class has closed. So for example, if I've got a class from 5 to 6 and then I've got people already joining my class from 6 to 7, that's not actually possible, because one teacher can only have one room open at a time. You can have multiple rooms, but obviously each one has to be one consecutive, one after the other. So it's not a good idea to tell students, yeah, you can go into the next room for your class when your previous class hasn't finished. I hope I'm explaining myself clearly there. So it's a really good idea to turn that off, all right? Now, something else that I've learned this week, especially again with young learners, often when I'm working with these technologies, I mute the participants on entry, particularly if I'm doing a webinar and I've got 200 or 300 people online. I really can't have the audio on. But when you're doing classes with younger learners who expect to be able to speak and to communicate with their friends and see their friends on the screen, actually it may be that at the beginning you need to turn that on. Now, there is a control in the actual lesson when you're teaching in the classroom where you can just mute everyone with one click. But my advice is that actually it's probably a good idea at the beginning of a lesson, if you're working with young learners, to have that on, not have that on, sorry, so that they can actually communicate with each other. Quite a few teachers have been telling me that this week. Another setting to think about is private chat, and I would personally turn that off if I was working with students, so that they can't individually chat to each other. They can only chat to the whole group. I think that's really important. If I was obviously in a business meeting or something like that, may be different, but particularly when working with younger learners, then you may want to turn that off. Now, I find this quite useful actually to play a sound when participants join or leave. It can help me to know how many people are coming into the room or leaving the room. So actually it's quite a good idea to do that. And you can actually set it that it's only heard by the host and also heard by a host and attendees. Well, there's no need for the attendees to listen to that. So my advice would be to set that to heard by host only. I do suggest, for example, that you do allow transfers, so I've put that to on, so students are also able to share pictures or share files, etc. Now, this particular setting, a lot of people have been getting confused because they've noticed, for example, that all the students can screen share. You can make it that only the teacher can screen share. I obviously have been allowing all the students to screen share, and that's really important when you do a breakout room. Because if you put students into a breakout room and then no one can screen share, then obviously they can't share anything on the screen and talk about it. So that's a really important setting. And this one here, who can start sharing when someone else is sharing? Well, I think that's a good idea that it's only the host can do that. Otherwise you can have all students kind of battling to share stuff on their screen. So yes, all participants can screen share, but only you can kind of override it. And I think that's a really important setting. This is a super important setting. If you want your students to be able to annotate onto the interactive whiteboard software or over a PowerPoint slide, you need this button on. Allow participants to annotate, okay? Absolutely vital. Now I'm just going to jump out the training in a minute and actually show you this in functioning so that you understand it. You've kind of got two ways of working. You don't give students the permission to annotate, in which case when you open up something onto the screen and you begin to annotate it, you then need to pass permission to them, and then they can annotate, and then you take permission back. But only one person can annotate and you're in control. However, if you want multiple students all annotating on the screen at the same time, then it's best to turn on annotation, and you don't need to do anything. The students will be able to just roll up to the top, choose it in there, menu, annotate, and then annotate onto the screen. I'm going to demo that for you now just to make it absolutely clear. Now I want to demonstrate another point because it's creating a lot of confusion. I've set it that all students can annotate without even me giving them permission. And let me just show you this. I'll just do it with interactive whiteboard. I'm going to click on the interactive whiteboard, click on share. Ivana, can you see if you can go to the top of the screen and roll your mouse over, and you should see in a drop down menu it should say a note.
Yes, I can see that.
Well, then just click on it and then see if you can draw on the screen.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Perfect. All right. So in other words, you didn't need to ask for permission from me because in the settings, I've set it that all students can annotate on the screen. Okay. So
that's
that
correct,
works
yeah.
perfectly. Okay, Yvonne, I'm just going to demonstrate one final thing. If I click on screen share, this time I'm going to click on a PowerPoint slide and click on share. And again, I want you to just tell me if without me giving you permission, you are able to go to the top of the screen and click on a note and then maybe draw a circle round one of the words or something on the screen. Are you able to interact even if I don't give you permission? Can you tell me?
Yes, I can do it.
Right, perfect. Okay, and the reason that she can do that is because I set it to students can annotate, and that means that they don't even need to require permission from me, and they can interact with the PowerPoint slides or with as I just showed you before, an interactive whiteboard, or in fact basically with anything that you open on the screen. Now as you scroll down, you come down to the more advanced ones. So if you click on that tab, it'll do the same thing. It will bring you down here. And this is crucial. If you want to do breakout rooms, then you need to do that. Now breakout rooms allow you to basically put students into smaller groups to work together. Now I don't schedule this because you can do it automatically when you're in the room. Once you're in the room, you've got your 20 students in there, you click, you say 5 breakout rooms, do it automatically, and they're all put into their room. So there's no need to schedule your breakout rooms before the lesson starts. Now there's not many of these settings that I worry about, but I will come down and just point this one out. If you're going to allow students to join the room before you, which I've suggested that you don't do, that you actually put them into a waiting room, and we'll be looking at that in a minute, then when attendees join a meeting before host, notify host. But that is not a good idea because you're going to get loads of emails or messages, so I wouldn't do that. Okay, and I think that is the basic settings that I have so far become aware of. There's quite a few of them there, isn't there? So just to make absolutely clear where we are, if we were just to go back onto the, let's click at it literally from the meetings where you schedule your meetings, all right? And I've got one meeting scheduled. I'm coming down here to my settings, and in the settings I'm looking at all of the settings to do with the meeting. That's the basic ones and advanced. Hope that helps you. Those are really important. They really do make a difference to how the lesson performs, particularly, and I'm going to do a few more, but just to summarize with that first part, is making sure that the students are able to annotate on the screen. If you're teaching, that's going to be really useful to you. And then think about what you're going to do if you allow students to join your room before you come in, because if you're doing a lesson before, so you're already in another room, you can only be in one room at a time, then it's no point in allowing the students to come into the room because you're already teaching in another room. And actually they won't be able to come in anyway, because if you have an account, you can only be running one room at a time. So it's not possible, for example, for the students to join the next class if you're still doing the previous one. So keep that in mind. Hopefully I've made that clear. I want to go on now and look at some other settings, and that's to do with recordings. Now, I think I'm right in saying that we actually want, in the recordings tab here, allow hosts and participants to record the meeting to a local file. I think you need to choose this one here as well, because I think you want hosts can give participants the permission to record locally. In other words, you can decide if you actually want to allow students to record locally, and when we go into the room in a minute I'm going to show you that. Now, quite a few of you have been asking me about that. So I'm going to try and show you how that process would work. The student would try to record the session. They won't be able to do it. They can request for permission from me, and then I can go up to where they're listed in the participants and say yes, can record, or not allow them to record by simply not giving them permission. So let me actually again jump into the session and show you that, because I think again that's something that's really, really important. Now I want to make this recording process clear, because I've set it that the student has to request the option to record the lesson. I'm just going to check. So I've got Ivona in the room with me as a student. Ivona, can you click on the record button and try and record the lesson?
No, I can't. When I press on the record button, it comes up with a message, please request recording permission from the meeting host.
Okay, so right, send me a message, ask me for permission to record the lesson.
Okay. Okay, done.
Right, so you've sent me a message saying, can I record the lesson? And then I can come up to you here and click on more, and I'm going to say allow record. Now, Ivona, if you click on the record button now, you should be able to record the lesson.
Yes, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, and it is also possible for me to turn that off, so I can click here and forbid recording as well. Now, whether or not you're going to allow people to record your lessons is something you're going to have to think about very carefully. Particularly maybe at the beginning when you're a bit inexperienced using Zoom, maybe you don't feel confident, you're probably very likely to make quite a lot of mistakes at the beginning, and you may feel that that's not a good feature. Later on it could be quite interesting. For example, if the students are speaking or doing a presentation and you want them to have a recording of it so that they can go over their lesson and see what that they've done. You may want to set this one. It can be useful to automatically record to the local computer. So local computer means it's actually going to save onto your computer. Obviously, if you're teaching a lot of classes, which some teachers are, then that might not be a good idea, because obviously you're going to have a lot of files. But keep that in mind. Also, this may be useful, this setting here. Do you want to make sure that students have been warned if you are going to record the session? Then you may want to get their consent. Okay. Now, when you send out an invitation, you're also given a telephone number. It's quite surprising how many students may end up connecting using their smartphones. One thing that you may want to do, therefore, is to mask the number in the participants list. One thing that I've been told, obviously a lot of people will log in, especially young learners, using their mother's or father's mobile device or desktop, or sometimes going to be a smartphone as well. Then it is important in that case to go in and change all the names so that the names are correct, because often people will be coming in and there'll be the name that will be up there in the participants list will be the name of the person whose technology they're using, and I'll try to point that out in a minute, okay, because that's a tip that I've been given as well. So I just want to make that point really clear. As the students come into the class, if they've got strange names, and there could be lots of reasons why they're going to have strange names depending on the device they're using, you can roll over their name, come down here and choose rename. Now I know you can't see that very clearly, but the option, the last one here, is to rename. Okay, so we looked at all the general settings. I hope that was useful, but don't forget, when you actually create a room, you can override some of those general settings. You do get another chance that you might have specific ones for that particular lesson that you want to change. So just to make that clear, as I said to you right at the beginning, you have 3 levels. Your general settings, the way that you want the room set up. You can override some of those settings when you actually create the room, because you might have different rooms, different size classes, adults, children, etc. And obviously you're going to change things. And then finally, you can actually change a few settings while you're doing the presentation, and we're going to look at that at the end as well. So let's jump now to when you create the presentation, some of the settings. Now I want to just come back to the meeting and just point out something. When you schedule a meeting, you can override some of these settings. Okay, so again, you can come back and override some of these settings. So at the moment, for example, when this particular meeting starts, the students won't have their video on. Okay, now that's probably a good idea in terms of control, because often when you've got the video on for everybody, that can really slow down the delivery. However, if you're working with young learners, I've been advised to say yes. Let the students, just for 5 minutes, let them come on and see themselves on the screen, and let them kind of just feel part of the system. And you can always turn their video off afterwards. Okay, and you can do that when you're in the class. So not a good idea to enable join before host if you have consecutive classes. I hope I'm making that clear. Okay, if you've got an account, you can only have one class open at any one time, so your students cannot join your next class anyway if you're still delivering a class. If that isn't the case and it's just say one lesson, yes, click on that and they can just come into the room, and that will work fine. Okay, and again, I've suggested don't set this. In the past I've said yes, set it, but again, when working with young learners, it seems to be the case that it's really important that they kind of get on and they get their few moments of fun and they can chat and see each other, and kind of the whole novelty of coming online. And so it may be a good idea to let them at the beginning have the audio on, and then you can then obviously again mute everybody afterwards. So just keep that in mind. And again, we're going to set this. Now what we're going to do now, those are the settings. Remember what I also said, that when you do this, you are not restricted to whatever time you set here. That's simply for the invitation I pointed out at the beginning. Let's go on the screen now and look at some of the settings when you're actually on the screen. Now most of the settings can be found by either clicking on audio and click on audio settings, and you've got all these tabs: general, video, audio, share screen, etc. Now obviously you've set most of your settings before. We've gone through all those settings, and those settings, once you've set them, will be the same for all your rooms, apart from when you create the room if you override some of the settings. Okay, so you've got your general settings, and you can override a few of those settings when you actually create the room, and when you're in, you can override some of the settings. I'm just going to point out a couple of things here that might be useful. One thing that people have been asking me is where are my recordings? So if you click on recording, it's here. It's in Documents, Zoom. Okay, so you can change that. So if you wanted to change and move it to another window, you can do that. But you should find that in your documents, once you've got Zoom, you've actually got a folder, and that is where your recordings will be saved. Okay. If you come down to here, to the share, and just click on the advanced share options, good idea here is how many participants can share at the same time? 1. Who can share? Everybody. And who can start sharing when someone else is sharing? Only the host. Those 3 settings, which we put in the general settings, but just to point out that they're also here available, is really important. That allows everyone to share their screens, and with breakout rooms that's absolutely vital, but only the host can intervene. If someone's sharing, the host can override and start sharing something else, and that's really important as well, so that if a student is sharing something and you want to stop it, you can do that. So that's a really good setting to know about. One final thing, and I'm sorry I'm going through so many things, but so many questions people are asking me. So full screen, we lose the chat window. We can still open it, but it's going to be floating. Come back, exit full screen, chat appears. Remember to tell your students to open up the chat window. They don't see it automatically if you open it. They also need to open it. If you minimize and you therefore close the screen right down, now the screen is here. Just roll over and press this, and you will come straight back into full screen. God, there's a lot of settings in Zoom, I can't deny that. I'm going to emphasize the point, I've used these technologies many times, but I've only really been working with Zoom like this for the last couple of weeks. I had used it previously, but just to do kind of webinars, I've never really looked at it as a tool for teaching English in a class with young learners or with teenagers. And I've tried my best to go from all the advice that I've received from other teachers and also all the practice sessions that I've been doing this week. Those are the key settings. I really hope that video was useful.